Spangler?
Here.
Mr. Viera?
Here.
Dr. Vogt is absent. Dr. Selly?
Here.
Mrs. Wittes?
Here.
I hereby certify that this meeting has been published in the newspaper in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and posted as required by law.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome Trish Canties and T&M Associates for coming tonight with your presentation. All
Great.
yours.
Thanks.
Thank
So
you.
I'm just going to kick this off and provide some context, and then Ed Herman from T&M Associates will do the bulk of the presenting. So the topic is the environmental resource inventory, and Ed's going to get into more about why that's important and how it's going to be used. But to provide some context, we presently have an environmental resource inventory that's part of the master plan. It was approved by resolution of the planning board in 2011. So there is one presently in the master plan. But because it's 10 plus years old, a couple of years ago, the Environmental Commission and the Green Team applied for a grant to update the ERI and make it current, to the present day. We were lucky enough to get the grant. It was from Sustainable Jersey, and with that grant, we were able to hire T&M Associates. We do a lot of work with the city, and one of the specialties is environmental engineering. So for the last year plus, T&M has worked very closely with the Environmental Commission and the Green Team to produce a very comprehensive document. The new ERI is roughly 100 pages of narrative and about 30 very detailed maps based on GIS data. And Ed's going to go into a little bit more about the implications of what having GIS data means and how we can leverage it going forward.
Rich, can I
Sure.
just 1 second? I mean, just for anybody who might be watching and just to refresh us, just can you in a sentence or two explain what the ERI is, just so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ed's going to go into that.
Sure.
I just wanted to provide some context in terms of
Thank you.
what we're trying to accomplish today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, ultimately our intent is that this new ERI replace the existing ERI and become part of the master plan. That's what we'd like to see happen. As a step in that process, we want to present it to the council and mayor and offer you guys the opportunity for any feedback or comments, which we would incorporate into ERI before we take it forward to the next step, which with your permission would be to bring it to the planning board and seek their approval. Okay? Any questions on why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish?
Well, my question is how long will it take for it to become part of the master plan? What's the, goal, the deadline?
So, we don't necessarily have a deadline that we need to meet, but in terms of process, as you know, I am on the planning board, so spoke to Eric Brackman and to the planning board attorney, and this is the protocol that they recommended. That is, get feedback from the council, okay? Following that, take it to planning board, and it would be part of a noticed agenda that would invite the public to participate as well. But that would be the final step. If the planning board approves it, then a resolution would be passed to incorporate it into the master plan and replace the old one.
Okay, thank
Is that
you.
clear?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So without any further ado, we turn it over to Ed Herman.
Sure. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Rich said, Ed Herman from T&M Associates. I am a principal with the firm. So we were engaged to do an update to the ERI. I'll sit if that's okay, just so in case I have to take any notes. If anybody's okay with that. So yeah, environmental resource inventory is really largely a desktop operation. It's a compilation of data. Basically, it's maps and it's text that talks about the environmental resources within the city. It's also incorporates some man-made features in addition to just natural features. Talks about trees and floodplains and all those types of things. And it's largely a desktop exercise, so within the scope of this document, it didn't involve going out and doing tree surveys or anything physically on the ground. It's really meant to be more of a planning tool and document that could lead to additional things. There's some recommendations in the report But it's a planning tool, so you would use it in terms of, you take some of the ideas that are in this document, and then you can further expand upon that. You could hire someone to do additional work in areas that would be important to the city. Largely, this is about preserving and understanding land use implications on your existing natural resources within the community. So that's effectively what an ERI is. As Rich said, the last ERI was done, I believe, also by grant back in 2011. So it's been 12, 13-ish years since the last time it was done. The one nice benefit to a more modern ERI now is when we did it in a GIS framework, which means it's all using data sets that can be updated more frequently and more easily. Whereas the last, in 2011, they didn't really have the technology that we do today. So in terms of updating mapping, we have all sorts of outside sources of information. DEP has tons of information on their GIS website, Geographic Information Systems. It basically is largely a mapping tool, but you can identify any number of things, property limits, all those types of things are done in these shape files and things through GIS. So ultimately it leads to, the ERI is intended to be kind of a living, breathing document. You may not produce it and publish it on a yearly basis or anything like that. Obviously 10 to 12 years was when the last one was done. But you would have the flexibility and the ability to update it. There's a lot of links in the document that bring you to a website that has the most current updated information. So it's helpful in that regard. It can help planning boards, any of the environmental commissions, anything like that. They have a resource now that they can look at the mapping and identify, hey, there's a project that's proposed here. What impact would this have on natural resources? And even consultants and anyone that is doing land use, they have documents that they can now look at. Typically, you would look at the master plan. If this would become part of the master plan update, they would have that information available, so they can look at it and say, oh, Lake Takanashi, we have to be mindful of this, that, or the other thing. So it's both a planning and design tool that would help improve ways of land use in the city. So again, it's intended to be a living, breathing document. There are some recommendations that were made. One of the other things that was important when we worked with the Green Team was we solicited public input. We had a public meeting. We also did an online mapping tool that allowed residents to input information that was important to them. They could basically go on and pick a location and say, hey, this intersection floods all the time. I know because I live around the corner, and when I drive home after a heavy rain, the road's full of water here, or things like that. They had an opportunity to present, so that's reported in the document as well. We kind of compiled all of those pieces of information that we got by way of feedback. So it was intended to be a community-based, so everyone had some feedback and opportunities to weigh in on things. Again, this is largely an informational tool for use by both the city and outside people to better understand any limitations that they're working with. So there's a few recommendations that we put in there that you can use to talk more about water quality and understanding things like you have here, urban forest plan. So there's a number of things that you can see, and it would be hard to really do it any justice. Like Rich said, it's a 100-page document full of lots of information that you can look through. I think one of the big benefits is a lot of it was key to active hyperlinks that you can just click on, and it'll bring up the Monmouth County GIS page that talks about here's the latest and greatest information on the particular topic. So even as this document becomes a little bit stagnant, those links should be preserved to get you to the places that'll have the most current information. So I think that's largely what I wanted to kind of share. Just if you've got an opportunity to look through it, you'll see a lot of the mapping that was done. There's some really good maps in there. I think they're helpful. I think that's largely the the visual representation that you'll see through the areas can be helpful in a quick glance to see areas of concern. We talk about brownfields and locations where there's site remediation, either undergone or in process, things of that nature. So, it was an effort to put it together, but I think at the end here we've done a pretty good job of conveying the information in a reasonably concise manner that touches on a lot of the key elements. Basically, it was updated from the 2011, but I think updated, improved, and enhanced in many ways. So with that, I really offer any questions that you may have. We can certainly entertain anything. I don't know that I would be prepared to necessarily go into great levels of detail, but hopefully you all had a chance to at least look at it. And if you have any particular questions, concerns, comments, we'd be happy to entertain anything. And if I don't have the answer, we can certainly get the team together to give you any input that you may see.
And I had two quick questions. The first was, can you give an example, let's say since 2011, where the ERI was helpful in terms of a particular project or development or something that the city has done, just as sort of a practical, to get a practical understanding of it?
Well, so even something as simple as an aerial photograph, right? I mean, so in 10 years, there's been a lot of development that happened, so you can kind of indicate, okay, well, where are the hot spots? Where has development occurred? What did this look like 10 years ago versus what does it look like today? The mapping has really come a long way. There's the county, and there's a company called Near Maps. It used to be Google Earth was sort of like everybody's quick desktop reference to see what does the ground look like, in a quick, I use it all the time. Near Maps is doing photography, I think every 3 to 6 months, so it's a little more frequent than like what you might see on Google Earth. You look at sometimes and it might be 3-4-year-old imagery. That's not helpful, right? Where you look at some of these other maps, and in real time you can say, oh boy, I can see here's the disturbance affiliated with this particular project, and here's the limits. You can see, zoning officers are using it a lot for desktop reviews of code enforcement issues, things of that nature. I mean, that's a really big, important use. I know a lot of towns are doing it in that regard. That helps them.
So I can give a specific example, and this happened largely before my time here, but I was able to find the documentation. So there's an open space plan for Long Branch that was developed, again, around the time that the ERI was approved. That open space plan leveraged the data in the ERI to establish, first of all, the inventory of open space, and second, goals in terms of preserving and extending open space. So for the purposes of this ERI, that open space map, and that's not one of the maps, but looks like exactly like those, has been updated with any changes and a current view of the open space. So we have at our fingertips a resource that we can look at if we want to see, and there's not a lot of it, but there is some open space in the city. So that's an example, and we can also use that as a baseline if we want to update our open space goals.
Another thing is tree, there's some of the commentary in there is about preservation of trees and forestry management, things like that become clear when you see development, removing trees, and you start denuding areas around town. It's important to understand, it helps you decide what you need to do in terms of reforestation in certain areas. I think we all know the benefits of the trees. One of the challenges every community faces is with development typically comes a lot of tree clearing that sometimes the ordinances require replanting, sometimes not as heavily as you would like to perhaps see. So that's a challenge. Losing habitat for the wildlife is an ongoing theme with that as well.
Another tactical opportunity is, again, and Charlie, your team's probably familiar with the GIS system right there. At least a couple of licenses in the city. I know the police department had one, or a couple, and DPW has some licenses. So in terms of mapping out storm sewers, right, we have a baseline of data in ERI now with the GIS database behind it that can be used as a starting point to further map out where all the storm sewers are. So I know there's again, some work that's been done with the city, using the city's GIS license, this data could be incorporated into that and extended. So, you know, another practical example. And T&M will be turning over, once this is approved, you know, all of the GIS data, and Charlie will figure out who
Yep.
should receive that.
When you mention open space that's still around, is it privately owned they talking about, or is it city-owned open space that you mentioned?
The open space map is primarily city.
Privately.
What is shade tree inventory?
Just that, an inventory of city-owned trees, which we actually have a grant that was received by the city, and it's out for bid now, I believe, to have a firm come in and actually complete an inventory of again, all the city-owned trees. And exactly, you know, what's a city-owned tree versus a private-owned tree, I know they've been going back and forth on that, so I can't tell you exactly what the delineation is. But the intent is to be able to have, you know, a database and inventory of all the trees so that we can, you know, maintain it, keep track of it, understand where there are opportunities to do more planning, keep track of any development that's going to remove trees and make sure that they're accounted for per the tree ordinance.
It has nothing to do with Allen County Shade Tree Commission?
I think some of the data was sourced from,
Right, okay.
but no, I don't believe
That's
so.
what-
Ed, are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that organization.
That's fine.
I think they're only responsible for shade trees on county roads, right?
I don't think so.
So I didn't, yeah. What's the,
Okay.
and what's the name of the website? Did you draw the maps from that website that you were talking about?
No, it's a compilation of, you know, available data sets from New Jersey. The state of New Jersey has their own GIS network that has a lot. The county
Right.
leverages some of the state's baseline. They have some of their own. So anymore, it's like you can almost find a map of just about anything.
But you said there was a website you used. in
Near
Circle?
Map.
Near Map?
Oh, Nearmap is the,
It's very-
they're the aerial photography. They're kind of the up and coming. We actually got
You need a login.
Yeah, we got I think we got a license, but the county offered that to most of the municipalities as like a share service kind of a thing, but you have to pay.
It's not like Google where you can go on, you need a login.
Oh.
Did the
Thank you,
county
Charlie.
offer to share service, you said?
I think they had issued that as a directive to municipalities that they would have the ability to share. I don't know if that window was still open, but it's helpful. It's really good, and the photography is very crisp. You know, one of the challenges is depending on when you fly the aerials, they're either helpful or not helpful. If you do it in the middle of the summer, that's all you see is green tree canopy and you can't see anything on the ground. So whenever you do aerial photography, you typically want to do it in the winter when all the deciduous trees are barren, so you can see more site features. But it's powerful when you can find things really quickly. You don't have to send somebody out to go look at it. You can get a sense of, you know, I know there's a project going on here. Let's see, when did that start? You know, sometimes the question comes up and you can go back and look at, oh, well, I can see the land disturbance started in, you know, June of 2020. It can be that linear. It's not always exact, but at least you have more frame of reference on which to refer.
Rich, is there anything we can do to help this?
Well, if there are any more questions or comments, you know, we would ask the council's approval to take this now to the planning board, you know, for their review and approval, and ultimately to incorporate it into the master plan. So that's really the ask.
I know there's some recommendations. Do you see anything major that stands out from 2011, the new one that we're proposing? I know, I saw the recommendations and everything, basically.
I think that's a good summary
Yeah.
of the opportunities that, some of which were cited in the prior ERI as well.
Yeah, that's
And
right, 'cause I
these-
know there was some in the prior,
Yeah, these we feel are really the priority areas that the city might want to consider investigating.
But things that typically show up, you know, almost in every ERI you'll see, or the stormwater management, that's largely tied into some of the other state directives that are already in place, so they can be kind of done synergistically in that regard. Stream corridor protection is always important, you know, lake management, things like that. are always important, and you'll see those. And you know, some of the other opportunities are having solid data sets and information that you can refer to can sometimes be used in furtherance of grant applications. And if you have the data available, you know, they like to see things like that. It's an easy add-on to a grant application. You know, refer to this section of the ERI or the master plan. Those types of things can give you a leg up on grant application, things of that nature.
Is there any other questions?
Nope.
No? Thank you so much for, being with
Okay.
us this evening. It was very helpful and informative.
So we're okay with going to the planning board, right? And we're gonna ask T&M to support us in that also. We appreciate your help with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys. Thanks. Thank you. Take care. Have a good night.
Rich, thanks for everything too. Thank you for
No
everything
problem.
too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The next item is old business?
And nothing.
No? Old business? New business?
I have nothing.
Review of regular meeting agenda, any questions?
No.
Okay. I need a motion to close the public portion of the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? I need a motion to adopt resolution R 94-23 to go into executive session for the following items. Attorney-client privilege, engineering